Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're going to chat a little bit about some of the controversial statements and controversial narratives coming out of the Oval Office meeting yesterday. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and let's talk about the clown show yesterday. President Donald Trump met with a band of schmoes. What? Oh, what an embarrassing group of people! What an embarrassing group of people! You know, if you are a person in Europe, and let's say you're France or UK or wherever, and you look at these clowns that came to quote represent your country, at that point you got to think about leaving. About just, I don't care where you're going to go. I don't care if it's like Iceland. That would be a good place. Any place with it, as the I always go back to Malcolm X when he talked about somebody walking up to one of the field slaves and saying, "Do you want to run away?" And the field slave said, any place is better than here, right? I'm thinking, if you're in Europe, any place is better than here. It's bad. I mean, okay, I am an American and I have not been happy for a while. We had George W. Bush, and this guy was about as sharp as, I will just say one thing. He was probably smarter than Kamala Harris, but that ain't a high bar, right? Then Obama came in and he looked great and sounded great and all that, but he was just a tool of Wall Street. Nothing more, nothing less, a tool of Wall Street, right? We get Trump one, we get Biden. I mean, I don't feel as though I've had a lot of people to be proud of by any stretch of the imagination. But this crew came in on their knees. So they come into Trump, and apparently they have been coaching the Green Goblin, as Alex Christopher likes to call him. They've been coaching this guy to keep his mouth shut and do what he told. He's like, thank you, good, yes, okay, oh, I appreciate it, thank you, good, yes, thank you, good. He was an actor, and they taught him 3 or 4 lines. He repeated his lines over and over and over. That's why they came, because they know he may be an actor, but he's a lunatic, he's an idiot, and they knew that he couldn't control himself and he'd say something stupid. But they came in to handle the job for him. Okay, let me, I always talk about narratives. When we have a discussion, what's behind the discussion? You know what I mean? How do we view the discussion, the words that are said, the background of the discussion? Here's what I mean. There was a famous guy, I can't remember who it was, but bottom line, I think it was name, but what he said was, he said, you give me any, and I'm paraphrasing, you give me any piece of work, give me about 10 pages, and I'll tell you when it was when it was written. Was it an Edwardian phrase that they use? If I read something from the Democrats and they're like, yeah, and Putin this or that, I'd be like, okay, he said within 10 years. Okay, that would be probably within 2016 and 2025, because the Democrats were all, so you listen to what's said and you can kind of pick up the background, the context of what's being said, right? So as we discuss what was said here, I want you to think about the background, the discussion, and I'm going to touch on it. In other words, the narratives behind it, because and this is important, because the comments that were made here all supported various narratives. It was an attempt to maintain the narrative, right? And then we got a saying, a guy says, I see a goat, and he says, on the background of what? What do you see on the background of that goat? On the background of that grassy field. And what do you see that grassy field on the background of? On the background of those hills. And what do you see those hills on the background? On the background of the sky. And what do you see the sky on the background of? On the background of consciousness, right? That's the back. Eventually, everything eventually ends up to the background of consciousness, right? So here's my point. Let's think about this. The first one of the things that happened here was Trump has made it clear, and this is when it became clear when he met with Trump with Vladimir Putin, when he respected Vladimir Putin as a legitimate player on the world stage, when Marco Rubio said, "Hey, look, man, the guy's got freaking nukes. You know what I mean? He's the head of a powerful country. Let's be realistic here, right?" When Trump said, "Hey, they got an army. They defeated Hitler. They defeated, come on, you know what I mean?" So basically, the Trump team, albeit I'm not saying in favor of their foreign policy, I'm just saying in this instance, they set a stage for a discussion that was not based on a narrative, that was based on physical, kinetic, empirical. You see the way I'm going with real world stuff. Hey, what are we going to do? They got nukes. They can fry us all. Let's be honest about this here. Hey, look, they're winning a war. Come on, they're not going to lose, right? So that's the background that Trump and his team were talking on. Now, I'm not trying to say that they're genuine and that Trump's some kind of a dove and that he's the second coming of Garland Nixon and the peace movement of Code Pink or something. I'm saying I understand that this is the empire, and the empire is still going to do empire things. It's going to try to rule the world. It's going to take other areas to try to destroy Russia and China. That's a given. We all know that. But let's talk about this one particular instance. Decisions have been made. And in my opinion, this is the decision that's been made. The United States said, hey, we're going to overthrow the government of Ukraine. We're going to use it to take out Russia. That's the plan. And then we'll go on to our next move, right? And it failed. And they recognize it failed. They're like, crap, that didn't work. Well, let's try something else. But first, let's get this mess cleaned up. That's all it is. Didn't work. We got to try something else. But first, let's clean this mess up. And then we'll try to take them out in a different way. Didn't work. Is what it is. That's they're being realistic. And Russia kind of is too. Russia's kind of like, yeah, you tried to take us out. Yeah, we did. Didn't work. Yeah, kind of didn't. Guess we better clean this mess up. Yeah. Well, I know you're going to try to take us out and destroy us tomorrow. Yeah, we are. But we'll burn that bridge when we come to it. As for now, let's get this mess cleaned up, and then we'll go forward. And the Americans are like, fair enough. Let's get it done. But then you got the clown show in the EU who can't handle that for a number of reasons. But so the Trump team and the Russians are having a discussion based on a background of kind of a mutual agreement. You tried to take us out and you lost. Yep, we did. And we did. That's, that's two men sitting there. We had a fight and we lost. And I'm still going to try to get you, but it didn't work. Okay, I'm a man. You're a man. It is what it is. You can see Trump. It was almost like, you ever hear like, watch these movies and and this has been real life where like two big, ego generals, and their armies are fighting and one wins or one loses. They capture the other general and the general brings them in the tent and they have a meal and they have wine and he has great respect for his opponent. Hey, we defeated you. Yeah, you defeated us. And they talk about, and this man has respect. This is his enemy. And they both respect each other. How you had great battle plans. Yeah, sure did. We had a few weaknesses, but you guys overcame them. Blah, 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 blah. It is what it is, right? I kind of think there's that there. I think there's a little bit of that there. So now it's, all right, we got to clean up the mess. That's all it is. And then we'll be back next week to try to take you out and we'll be waiting. You know what I mean? Hey, we didn't get you this time, but we'll be back next week to try to get you down. Yeah, I know you will. Yeah, we will. You know it'll fail again next time, though. No, it won't. Well, we will see. Yeah, I guess we will see. That's the game. That's the reality, right? Okay. And the Europeans ain't there. They ain't there. And Trump and Putin both realize, checkmate. They both realize where we are. They're like, this is where we are. Let's do this thing. Okay. So if you recall, or maybe you don't know, but hopefully you do. If not, then I'll make you aware of it. December of 2021, when the Russians put forth a document to NATO and blah, 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 and they says, look, we got a list of things we need to talk about. And if this doesn't happen, we're going to kick Ukraine right in the ass. You know, it's like what they said was there could be military / technical responses. In other words, Ukraine's going to get it. And now the then chief of NATO, I don't remember which putz it was, right? Rutenberg or something, whatever. And he said, Russia doesn't get a say in this. And at that time, the US and Blinken went, that's not even the starting place. And Russia's like, well, okay then. All righty. And the war started. And I remember when the NATO, whoever the chief was, says this will be decided on the battlefield. And Sergei Lavrov said, perhaps you haven't looked at Russia's record on the battlefield, right? In other words, you know, we're going to commence to kick some ass here. It's what we do, but some people got to learn the hard way. Some people learn the easy way. Some people only learn through pain. Apparently, you got to learn through pain again. Every 100 years, you dumbasses, it's Napoleon, it's Hitler, now it's Zelensky. Every 100 years, you jackasses got to send some proxy from the West to try to take us out. We got to beat the living hell out of them. And then you know how to act. Some people don't know how to act until they get their asses kicked. As long as you think, get all huffy and puffy and think you're tough. Oh, we're going to get those Ruskies this time. And when we whip your ass, then you can know how to act. You can settle down and act like you got some sense for another 100 years. If that's the way it's got to be, that's the way it's got to be. We know the game. We're willing to play it if we have to. So enter Azov. The Russians commenced to kicking ass and taking names. Okay, so at some point, the Trump guys like, yeah, okay, what do we do? Now, this discussion, for instance, a ceasefire. The narrative in Europe is the Russians don't get a say. We do what we want. It's the old and the strong do what they can or may, whatever it is, and the weak suffer what they must, right? Which, if you, and I'm paraphrasing, but if you take that old adage to what it actually, to how it applies in this particular instance, the Europeans are the ones that are suffering what they must. See, they thought they were the ones that were the strong doing what they can or doing what they will. But they end up being the weak who suffer what they must. And it was a decision. We're going to take you out, Russia. And Russia's like, well, we will just have to see who's the strongest. And whoever's the strongest is the strongest. You can beat us, no problem. But I don't think you can. Okay, so now when they said ceasefire, here's what they're doing. We went to Putin and we said to Putin, darn it, you will give us a ceasefire. And the Russian says, if you can take it, but you can't, can you? So the answer is no. All right, well, in that case, we want a ceasefire, the Russians. In that case, no. All right, fair enough. Then we're going to demand a ceasefire. Now, how about that? We're demanding a ceasefire. The Russians are like, yeah, sure. What part of go to hell didn't you understand? Oh, well, sorry. We're busy killing Ukrainians. We'll call you when we're done. So at that point, at some point, the Russians talked with Trump. And because Trump was like, yeah, ceasefire. I got my man Kellogg here. And Kellogg saying ceasefire. We got to have a ceasefire. And he went to Putin and he says, ceasefire. And Putin's like, look, Trump, you live in the real world. These clowns over here, they're clowns. Trump was like, yeah, they are. Okay, here's where we are. I just got to tell you this. I'm going to be square with you, buddy. Yeah, we're never going to do the ceasefire. Oh, let me show you a map of the battlefield. Trump says, okay, let me go. Holy be Jesus. That's the battlefield. Hey, take it with you. Show it to your friends. Go over it. Whatever you want to do. I'm just saying that's where we are. And if I wanted to do a ceasefire, yes, I'm a powerful man and I got 87% of the vote, but I'd be out of office. I can't do it if I want to. You understand that. The Epstein files, Trump's like, ooh, yeah, the Epstein files. I kind of really do get it. You couldn't do it if you wanted to. Correct. Okay. So Trump comes back, and at that point, he's in the real world. Hey, ain't no point in trying to ceasefire stuff. The Russians said it ain't going to happen. Okay. So these clowns come in. Yes, a ceasefire would be great, and a ceasefire is be good. I mean, Trump has said to him, no ceasefire. Nah, no ceasefire. Oh, no ceasefire? Yeah, no possibility of a ceasefire? Correct. You know, a ceasefire would be good. Don't you think a ceasefire? We all agree that a ceasefire would be good. Yeah, a ceasefire would be great, President Trump. You know, that's what we need is a ceasefire. Trump's just sitting there going, alrighty. So at some point, Trump didn't say no, 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 no. He just, okay. So then it went to security guarantees. Yes, what we need is security guarantees. Now, we're not saying that Ukraine should be in NATO, but I guess we're saying NATO should be in Ukraine. What we're saying is this. Article 5 guarantees if they were in NATO, correct? Yeah, let's give them the Article 5 guarantees anyway. Or we'll effectively give them the Article 5 guarantees, but we'll call them something else. And we've always wanted to put, put Ukraine into NATO, and then we give them Article 5 guarantees, and we put NATO troops in Ukraine, correct? Yeah. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Forget it, man. Putting them in NATO, okay, fair enough. That ain't going to work. But here's the plan. We'll do something totally and completely different. We will put NATO troops in Ukraine and give Ukraine an Article 5 guarantee. Instead of bringing them actually into NATO and things like that, we'll just do everything we would do if they were in NATO, including the Article 5 guarantee, and we'll just call it something else. Splato. That's what we're going to call it. Yeah, we're going to call it Splato. They're going to be in Splato, not NATO. How's that sound, Trump? And Trump's like, yeah, okay, well, he didn't want to say no. Not that. And then so it's like, whatever. I will talk, whatever. Now, let's go back to the beginning. The background of these two conversations is totally different. The narrative behind it, right? The narrative behind Trump, as I said, it's easy before. It's easy to see what the deal Trump made was when he was in Alaska. It is obvious. Trump went into Alaska saying, we want a ceasefire, and then we can get a ceasefire quickly and move forward from there. Trump came out of the Alaska meeting saying there ain't gonna be no ceasefire. As in my opinion, that was the deal. The deal was, and you can call it a deal. I won't even call it a deal. It was an acceptance. It was, the Russians told him, look, there's no point in asking for a ceasefire. There is no situation militarily or politically in which me, as the president of Russia, can give you that ceasefire. If I wanted to, I couldn't do it, man. So I don't know, I'm just trying to help. If we're trying to get somewhere, we got to be honest with each other. So when Trump came out, it was over. He was not going back. Nope. So if you want to call it a deal, an agreement, an acceptance, I don't care what you call it. Trump came out of that meeting, and that idea of a ceasefire, he accepted that the Russians will never say yes. At that point, think about it. I'm not pro or anti-Trump. This is reality. Trump was a real estate guy. He bought and sold real estate. I don't know if he did it, if he was good or bad at it. That's for somebody else to choose, but that's what he did. He was a real estate guy with coffee. They buy real estate. Do you think Trump's going to go up and say, I want to buy that building and I want it for $100,000? And the guy says, I'm asking $12 million for the building. Okay. 100,000 is the amount. And that, you think if the guy says, well, there's no chance of ever getting that deal, that Trump's going to come back every day and say 100,000, knowing that there's no chance? He's either going to walk away or he's going to come closer to what the guy wants. You don't do real estate like that. You're not going to keep coming back. Hey, I want to buy that house. I'd like to make an offer. How much? 150,000. My God, I'm asking 600. Okay, 150 then. You just said 150. I'm asking 600. I'll be back next week with a new offer. What's it going to be? 150,000. No, that's not the way it works in real estate, right? So Trump has come to the realization that guy wants 600,000 for the house. You're going to have to get close to 600,000, or you ain't getting the house. So let's be honest about it. The narrative that the schmoes are under, that the clowns are under, is Russia doesn't get a say. We don't care what Russia says. We don't care what Russia accepts. We don't care what Russia doesn't accept. We're not negotiating with Russia. We are getting together, just all together, and we are deciding what we want. We are deciding what we want. That's like me and you, we're going to go buy the house, and the house is $500,000. And when I get together, you say, I want to give the guy $100. And you say, yeah, that's fair, $100. And we go to the guy, $100. He says, I want $500,000 for that house. Yeah, but you're going to have to give it to us for $100. No! And we go back and we talk some more. Hey, let's get our other buddy to come in. Hey, man, let's buy the house, the three of us together. Fair enough. How much we going to go with? We're going to offer the guy $100. I thought the guy said he wouldn't take $100. We're going to offer him $100. Go back to the guy. All right, we got a new offer. What's that? $100. Get out of my office. What are you doing here? That's where they are. But that would mean that the seller doesn't get a say, except he owns the house. Right? Okay, here's my point. They're going back to that original concept that says the Russians are below us. They don't get a say. Don't they know we're the Germans and we're the Brits? They don't get a say. And we'll offer them whatever we want because we're the mighty British Empire. How dare they? And by the mighty British Empire, we mean the United States does our fighting for us. So this is what we want. And when they say we want the U.S. to give a security guarantee, what they mean is this: we can't fight. We have nothing. We don't have money. We don't have military. We don't have anything. And what we mean by security guarantee is you do the fighting, we do the demanding. Okay. So what we have now is, as the old movie says, what we have is a failure to communicate. What we have is two narratives that are running, side by side, but they can't meet ever. The one narrative over here says we can make demands and offers that the Russians will never take. The other one over here says we can't make demands and our offers have to be realistic. And they're going like this. They can never intersect. These two lines can't intersect. They're side by side because they're running on different trains. On different tracks. One track says the Russians don't get a say. They have to take what we offer. The other track says the Russians have proven that they got a say. They've proven that. They've proven that they get a say. We didn't offer them a say. We didn't offer them influence. They took it. We started off saying you can't have influence, and the Russian says we'll take our influence. They took their influence. And guess what? We got to respect them. I think that's one of the things, to be frank, that Trump respects about Putin. Hey, you see, think about this. Trump has met with two different groups of people. In comes the Russians. You got Lavrov coming in with a CCCP shirt on. I think that was hilarious. He's invoking the legacy of the Red Army, right? Invoking the legacy of the Soviet Union. And I mean, he was unapologetic about it. It was hilarious. You got Putin coming in on his big jet. And look, did he come up in a clown car and drop to his knees? Oh, sir, master, please. No. Came in on an IL-76, landed. There's a red carpet. Trump's there with the big Cadillac waiting for him on the red carpet, like you do for somebody who you respect. Putin gets off, walks down to the red carpet. He's got on a nice suit. He doesn't have on a black janitor's uniform like old Putsy the clown. Zelensky gets off. He's got his suit on, shakes hand with Trump, gets in the big Cadillac. Off he goes. And they're side by side. They're skinning and grinning. They're laughing. Right? Why? Because they respected each other. Because he knew he would say some things to Trump. I'd like to do this or that. Or I think Trump would say, no, I'm not doing that. Trump knew that he'd say to Putin, well, we need a ceasefire. And Putin would say, nah, not doing that. They weren't going to be, I'm sorry, sir. Do you please think maybe we could possibly get a ceasefire? There wasn't no discussion like that. That ain't how Putin talks. Are you kidding me? You mess with me, buddy, I'll put an Su-57 right up your behind. But look, Trump's flying stealth bombers and fighters over Putin's flank with Su-35s. Those are men. They came in there like men. They didn't ask for respect. They commanded respect. They demanded respect, and they received respect. If you do business with somebody, don't call them and say, excuse me, sir, do you think maybe you could have my car finished by next week? No. You call them and say, hey, look, you've been messing around a little bit, get my car fixed. I'll be needing it Monday. I got to get my car. I got things to do. You've had my car for 5 days now. I need my car money. You don't call and say, Well, I know you're busy, sir, but is it possible? Do you think there's any way you could sometime next week maybe have it finished? No, the guy's had your car for 5 days and you need it back. And he's screwing around. You know why? Because he's a mechanic. He's working on your car. And he's got other people. He's working on their cars and he's got to get cars out. But you know whose car is going to come out? The guy that calls him and says, hey, mechanic, yeah. Hey, Joe here. Yeah, look, I need that car tomorrow. I got work to do. And I got to run around and I got to get this rental back. I need a car tomorrow by the close of business. He's going to say, I'll get it to you. And then when you call and say, is it possible I could maybe get my car back? No, you can't get it by next week after. Okay, thank you. I didn't mean to disturb you. No, that's the way it works. You don't ask, you don't beg, you call, and you don't even demand. You just lay it on the line. Hey, I need my car next Monday. If the guy says, oh my God, well, I was a little late ordering the parts. I can't get it to you Monday. Well, I really need it Monday. Is there any way you need to get me the car Monday? I got to have that car Monday. I can't. I can get it to you Tuesday by noon. All right. Okay. Tuesday by noon will work. You're in charge. You're the one that's in charge. If you bullcrapped around with that guy, you wouldn't get your car for another week because you're weak and you're soft. And the weak and the soft people don't get things. The guy who calls, you don't have to be mean to him, but the guy that says, I need my car Monday, not the guy that says, can I get my car Monday, right? So these guys come in, can I have a ceasefire, please, sir? Mr. Sir, can I see? And they're sitting there, you look, and their little hands are together like this. The body language. Oh, God, the body language. Macron, his partners just probably kicked his ass before he got out of the plane. Old, what's her name? Brigitte had that guy by the nape of his neck. Bit. You will go in there and you get a ceasefire. Do you understand? Pap. Okay, Brigitte, I'm gonna see. Starmer. Let me show you something. Oh, you got to see this. This is the man. You got to see this video. Okay. Wait a minute. You're going to love this. This is Starmer. This is the guy who, man, he came in there and he told Trump what to do. You ready? Here's Starmer. Let's look at this. Let's look at a man's man. You ready? What? This is how a man punches. Oh boy. All right. Hold on. All right. So that's Starmer. These are the guys coming in to Trump. Let's see. These are the guys coming in to Trump to beg him for a ceasefire. And their position is this. We want a ceasefire. Why? Because Putin doesn't get a say. We've got to make the decision here. We're going to stand up to Putin. First of all, Putin, when he saw that video, I bet, of course, the Russians watched that slobber all over Trump's shoes session. And the Russians were doubled over with laughter. They're eating popcorn. They're watching it. Oh, you can't believe it. These guys want us to go to war with them. Right? So they came in looking like the little softies that they are. And they begged Trump, which made him hate him even worse. Look, let me tell you something about men. Men hate softies. Men hate guys other men who men like kind of detest those kind of guys. They go, oh, can I please? Oh, yeah. It's like, I didn't want to hang around somebody like that. That might get on me. Some of that like weakness may get on me, and I wouldn't want that to get on me, right? So Starmer comes in, I guess, just fresh from his session of punching the old heavy bag. Macron comes in there fresh from getting his ass beaten, his daily merciless beating from Brigitte. And Mertz, the CEO of BlackRock, I mean, let me say something about Mertz. Look at a picture of Stepan Bandera and look at Mertz. I'm not sure it's not the same guy. I bet you Bandera's his dad. I bet you. First of all, if Mertz's dad, so-called dad, was anything like Mertz, he ain't his real father. I'm just simply saying it like that. If the guy who's allegedly married to Mertz's mother is anything like Mertz, he ain't Merch's real father. Merch's mom was Stepan Bandera, whoever, the janitor, the pool boy, somebody else. Is just, if you want to know who Merch's dad is, look around the community, the gardener, the school boy, the next door neighbor, perhaps I think it's Stepan Bandera because he looks just like Bandera. But at any rate, so you get this guy who's of questionable ancestry and lineage, which he don't even know. So these people come in. Melonia, I think she's probably hoping that what's his name, that Elon Musk is there so she can beg him for a date or something. So you get this whole crew of misfits, of has-beens and never was. And to be quite frank, I think Trump hates their guts. He smiled at them, but I think he hates them because, like we all do, I think everybody hates them. How could you not hate them? There's something wrong with if you don't hate these people. So they come in there, and the idea is we're going to get Trump to embrace. Let me put it like this: we're going to get Trump to re-embrace the narrative that the Russians don't get a say. When Joe Biden was here, we would all come together and we would all negotiate amongst each other, and we'd come up with something that we knew the Russians wouldn't take, but we thought they should. And then we would put that together forth and say the Russians should take this. They're going to have to take this. They have no choice. Then the Russians wouldn't take it. And then we'd do it again. And we'd do it over and over. Then we'd introduce more sanctions. And we'd say this 19th tranche of sanctions is going to destroy the Russians. And then it wouldn't. And then we'd say the 20th would. Why? Because that's who we are. We're not grounded in reality. We just do this stuff over and over again. This is what we do. And that's what they've been doing. Now Trump team's ready to get out. So I suspect, and again, Trump ain't worried about them. He's dealing with Lindsey Graham and with the neocons here. And here's what I suspect. There is a faction. There's factional battles going on amongst the ruling elite and the neocons. And there's a faction that says, no, we got to go to war with China. There's a faction that says, no, first let's go to the Middle East and destroy Iran and kill lots of people there. And then we could sneak in the back door and take Russia out that way. Maybe we can even work with Russia because our economy is collapsing and we can make some money working with Russia. And then we can take Russia out after we've made money working with them. We'll get inside, the enemy in the gates, as they say. So there are factions that just have other plans, but they have come to the conclusion that if they keep going down the path that they're going down, the only thing they're going to face is a cataclysmic defeat. And they don't want a cataclysmic defeat, a catastrophic defeat. They want to escape the defeat, and it's right in front of their faces. But the Schmoes, they're not that smart. They're not grounded in reality. And all they can see is going home to their population. And their population is going to say, hey, you lied to us. You took advantage of us. You told us, and this is the bad part. How? Look, even now, what do they say? They said, look, and think about these narratives. Narrative A, if the Russians defeat the Ukrainians, we can't have that. Because if they defeat the Ukrainians, they will then attack Poland, and off they'll go and they'll attack everybody. Now they're losing to the Ukrainians. They can't fight. They're out of missiles. They're fighting with shovels and washing machines. They're just a woebegone group of ne'er-do-wells in their military that couldn't defeat anybody. But after they defeat Ukraine, though they can't defeat anybody, then they're going to attack all of the NATO countries. However, we need to put Ukraine in NATO, because if we put Ukraine in NATO, they'll never attack a NATO country. They won't attack Ukraine if they're a NATO country. So we got to put Ukraine in NATO. But if they win, they're going to attack all of the NATO countries involved at the same time. So you have these contradictory arguments, these contradictory narratives, but they didn't matter, because if you're one of these European, you're married to Brigitte Macron, you already ain't grounded in reality. Okay. But at any rate, so my point is, the Europeans have big problems, because in that they have never, ever gotten away from this argument that Our people are going to have to suffer. Our people are going to have to struggle. Our people are going to have to go through bad times to stop the Russians from killing us all. If Trump, let's go one better. Let's not even get to the outcome. If Trump is negotiating with the Russians to end this thing, then clearly he doesn't believe that the Russians are going to attack the rest of NATO. And Trump is the emperor of NATO. The United States is empire. It's the United States game. This is, you're playing a game that the United States set up, that the United States controls. The United States, the big dog in this game. And you're saying the Russians will attack us if the war is over. And the people who run the whole game are saying, no, they won't. You're saying we can't trust the Russians under any circumstances. They're liars, cheaters, and thieves. And the guy in charge of the game said, yeah, we can. Man, that's problematic. How do you go home and tell your people continue with the lies? See, if you were to say the things that Trump is saying, right? The things that Trump is implying, the things that the Americans are implying. If you were to go to Europe, go to Germany or the UK and start posting on social media, we can trust the Russians. We can make a deal with the Russians and they'll keep their word. I'm sure the Russians will keep their word. If you were to put that on social media, they'd lock you up. Literally, that's not a joke. If you were to go around, if you were to start marching around with a sign that says, we can trust the Russians, they'll keep their word. They're not going to attack the rest of the Europe. You walk around with a sign on that, you put that up on social media in Germany, in the UK, in the Baltics, in Poland, all over the place. You're going to jail. They're locking you up in France. But ain't that what Trump's saying? Trump said, we want peace and we'll get a deal. It implies that he trusts that the Russians will keep their word. Now, what happens? They go to, oh, we've got to have security guarantees. We got to have American troops on the ground. We've got to have all of that. What they're trying to do is get back to the narrative. No, we can't trust the Russians. Security guarantees. We can't trust the Russians. We got to make sure that they don't attack again. We got to do all these things. Our focus is on, we can't trust the Russians. That's why they have to talk about security guarantees so much, because their argument is you can't trust the Russians. You notice what Trump's saying. He doesn't really care that much about security guarantees. Oh, yeah, whatever. They're like, what about security guarantees? And Trump's like, yeah, whatever, security guarantees, whatever, sure, fine, great. Why? Because what he's saying is, when we make a deal, look, I met old Putin on the tarmac. We shook hands. We rode in my Cadillac together. That Cadillac was made in Detroit, brother. We rode in a Cadillac. We both had on nice suits and really nice shoes and ties. It was great. I looked at his watch. Swiss timing. It's a nice watch. Yeah, like yours too. Philippe Petit. Right? They sat there and they said, yeah, we can make a deal. Yeah, we can make a deal. I'll be straight with you. Okay. Now, Europeans are like, no, that'll never go. And Trump's like, I'm past that. So here's where we are. The Europeans are just schmucks. And so they're like, okay, we've got to maintain a narrative. The factions in the U.S., first of all, the Europeans ain't even in the game. This is about the factions in the U.S. fighting. Trump ain't worried about the Europeans. He's going to do what he's going to do. First of all, when they came yesterday, and they groveled and they kissed his ring and licked his boots and prostrated themselves, and they just were pathetic, jellyfish spined fools. They made it clear to Trump. They sent a message to Trump. You can do whatever you want, and we won't push back. We'll be upset, we'll whine, we'll cry amongst ourselves, but understand, we'll never push back. That's the message they sent. They said to Trump, you got it made here. We're soft, we're weak. That's all they did. They came in and they just said, we're weak and we're soft, and do with us as you may. So now that Trump wants to, Trump knows there's a catastrophic defeat coming for NATO, and he wants to say, you guys take the catastrophic defeat and we won't. And so now it's, man, if you guys want to handle this, you're going to have to. You can buy the weapons from us. We're happy to sell you all the weapons you want. And then when things fall apart, we're going to say, we told you so. That's what Trump is. See, Trump now is setting, if you think about it, it's kind of smart. And I'm saying Trump, I mean the collective Trump. The US don't like to take the loss. So the US is like, ultimately, we want to be in a position to say, I told you so. And we don't want to take the loss. We don't want to take the L. And I think that's where we are. I think there's a fight. There are factions fighting, but I think there's a number of factions that have come to the conclusion there's an L to be had, and that L needs to go to the Europeans and not to us. And the Europeans don't have they're too frightened, they're too emotional, and they're too vulnerable to figure out that the US is setting them up to take the L. And so they're just trying to hold on to narratives. That's all they're doing. They're trying to hold on to narratives. Trump had a Truth Social post afterwards, because afterwards the mainstream media tried to run with it. Again, the mainstream media is like Europe. It's like Europe. It's not all about narrative. So the mainstream media was like, yes, it's all about ceasefires and it's all about security guarantees, and Trump is still open to security guarantees and blah, blah, blah. Right? Okay. And Trump had a Truth Social post where it said, yeah, there'll be Europe can be involved or whatever, but we'll coordinate it. In other words, we ain't getting involved. Now, here's the other reality of it. For all the weeping and gnashing of teeth about Trump saying American troops on the ground or whatever, or saying security guarantees, and no need to weep and gnash of teeth, unless, of course, they rub Trump out or something, which could happen. And I don't think, to be quite frank, I think the faction that wants to end this conflict, probably to start other conflicts, I think J.D. Vance represents them even more so than Trump, not less. But at any rate, I think that I forgot where I was going with that, but let me continue. Ultimately, got where I was going when I got sidetracked with J.D. Vance, but that's not important. The bottom line is this. I think where we are now is that the Trump people, I know where I was going. I'm glad it came back to me. That as the mainstream media and the EU Schmoes and the Lindsey Grahams of the world still talk about trying to force particular outcomes on Russia. Oh, great. Yeah, we'll get a deal, but we'll have European peacekeepers in there, European troops in there. We'll do all these things that Russia doesn't want. In other words, yes, if we can't get the language and verbiage that we want, we'll just be able to do it. So, okay, fine. There's not going to be a ceasefire. There's going to be a lasting peace, but we'll get European troops in there, NATO troops in there, American troops. Again, even then, you're getting back to the narrative. The background of that is Russia doesn't have a say. Why? Because we know Russia will never say yes. So when you say, hey, okay, fair enough, we're going to go down the route and we're going to set this thing up so that we have what do you call it? A quick path to peace or something like that, instead of a ceasefire, but we're still going to put troops in. That implies that Russia doesn't have a say. See, that implies that you will be imposing a deal on Russia, because Russia will never say yes. So you're saying, yes, we'll get this deal and we'll do things that I know Russia will never say yes to, which means you still think you can impose a deal on Russia, and you can't. And Trump is not down with that. Trump's like, all right, we'll talk about I think Trump has gotten away from, I think Trump has made a turn. And I think the turn is away from, I'm tired of playing with this thing. I'm tired of going back and forth. I'm tired of saying, okay, we're going to do tariffs on somebody. We're going to do bone-crushing sanctions, and we're not going to do bone. We're going to do tariffs, and we're not going to do tariffs. We want a ceasefire. The Russians say no to a ceasefire. We say yes to a ceasefire. No. I think the Trump's kind of sick of that. He's like, look, let's just make a deal and get away. And I think the decision is we're dropping it on the Europeans. And the Europeans have not let go of the idea that they can impose a deal on Russia. Well, they'd have to impose a deal on the United States and Russia. Think about it. They wouldn't only have to impose a deal on Russia. They'd have to impose a deal on the US and Russia. And they can't impose a deal on the US. And the US ain't shooting at them. So you know they can't impose a deal on Russia. And that's where we are. I think the Trump team, before they took this, because what was going on, it's obvious now. Something's obvious. Let's finish up. But something's obvious. If you're looking at this, it's obvious that this, whatever was done, this decision to make a U-turn away from ceasefires, to change the language away from a ceasefire, to say we got to allow the Russians to have some say, that didn't happen overnight. Didn't happen overnight. It's clear to me that the Americans and the Russians have had, for some time, been involved in bilateral negotiations, and that the deal, the Alaska meeting was like a consummation, right? The Alaska meeting was not, okay, let's get together and figure out how we're going to do these things. It was Trump and Putin saying, we need to make a show. We need to make a public spectacle here that kind of makes it clear where we are. But that's what it was. It was a public spectacle. It was not just a rhetorical, but a physical, something we could see with our eyes. The whole world could see this is different. They've talked, and they've talked. This ain't talking. And the world could see that they smiled. The world could see. And you know what? In an interesting way, even though Trump and Putin are in different places where, let's face it, Trump's running an empire that wants to take out Putin's country, there is a healthy respect somewhere there. And with Trump, I think part of it is this. The same people, the people that hate Putin the most, hate Trump the most. You know, they've got common enemies. They have common enemies. The people that want to destroy Putin want to destroy Trump. And so I think there's a commonality there. Again, the reality is the U.S. empire is still up to no good, and the Russians feels it's their job to stop them. But I think they could stop and shake hands for a little bit. So I think that's where we are. Let me see something. If there's any breaking news that I need to touch base on. Oh, here's one. How about this? U.S. President Donald Trump has received a formal invitation to visit Moscow. Sergei Lavrov has confirmed. In an interview with Rossi at 24, Lavrov stated that Trump has an invitation. He says, yeah, so that's the bottom line. So they talked the other day. I would imagine that when they meet, they'll have some other kind of deal. But I think, to be frank, I think Trump takes the invitation. I think he takes the invitation. The other thing is, I think he needs to take the indication, because before he met with the Europeans, he met with Putin and he made a statement. After he meets with the Europeans, I think he needs to re-meet with Putin and to put an exclamation on the mark on the meeting. Now, listen, I know people are going to be critical of me. I'm not saying that Trump's a good guy. I'm not saying he's an imperialist, that the U.S. empire is not up to no good and trying to do all kinds of things because this system is crashing. All these things are true. I'm just saying, for a snapshot in time, the United States empire is caught in a trap. And it's not a mouse trap that snaps. It's one of those sticky traps. You know, where the mouse gets in it and it's like this goo, and the harder he pulls, the more that's what they're in. They're in a sticky trap, and they're trying to get their way, trying to get out of it. The empire wants to empire, but right now it's hard because it's caught in a trap, and they're trying to get out. And I think it benefits the Russians if they get out. I don't know what happens to the U.S. So Trump's been invited to Russia. A couple of other things. This is important. It's impossible for Crimea to return to Ukraine or for the country to join NATO, U.S. President Donald Trump told Fox and Friends. He added that Kiev had approached the U.S.-led military bloc to seatbelt and trying to get the peninsula back. They went in and said, we want Crimea back. This was at the beginning, Trump said. The other thing was, we want to be a member of NATO. Now, listen to this. Well, both of those things are impossible. It was always a no-no, both during the time of the Soviet Union and now with Russia, Trump explained, adding that Russia has always stressed it did not want the enemy on its border, right? Again, the rhetoric is, this is the reality, dude. And if you go back to Starmer, the last time he met with Trump, and he says, we need to get back Crimea. We need to get back these regions. And Trump said, you think you can take them from the Russians? To remind them, you ain't got nothing, dude. You're not saying we, you're saying I need to go get these things back. So when you say we need to take them back, well, be my guest. Go ahead. There's the Russians. Go kick their asses and take Crimea. Take all of that stuff. If you're such a badass, Mr. Punching Bag Man. Let me see. So we got that. I'm looking for any news. Let's see. Russia hands over the remains of 1,000 troops to Ukraine. India-China ties have made steady progress, according to Modi. That's a good thing. That's positive. We can thank the imperialists for that. That's good. Anything else of consequence? There we go. This is exactly what I said. The presence of NATO troops in Ukraine, regardless of the pretext or scenario, would be absolutely unacceptable to Russia. Foreign Minister spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has stated. I love Maria Zakharova. She's awesome. She accused London of attempting to undermine the ongoing diplomatic process. Commenting on British officials' remarks about a hypothetical military mission on Monday, Zakharova claimed that, quote, London is hell-bent on constantly upping the ante in the conflict and pushing its NATO partners to a dangerous line beyond which a new global conflict lies. We reiterate the position that we have voiced on multiple occasions that we categorically reject any scenarios envisaging the arrival of a military contingent in Ukraine involving NATO states. If you remember, what did they say? China. I suspect the Russians, when they start talking about peacekeeping forces or whatever, the Russians are going to say, sure, they'll be Russian, maybe Chinese. I think something would be really interesting or good is to see African, South American, Asian, Chinese forces, North Korean. I think those would be great. I'd love to see North Korean. I'd love to see African. For instance, what about Burkina Faso, even though Burkina Faso has to protect itself right now? But I think it would be a wonderful thing to bring some African forces in there. I think to bring some Venezuelan, maybe Cuban. How about this? Some Venezuelan, some Cuban, some Nicaraguan, some forces that look. You want to bring forces in that don't like me? Why can't I bring in forces that don't like you, brother? So there we go. Anything else? British Prime Minister Keir Starmer advised Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelensky on how to avoid another confrontation. According to NBC, Starmer was a key figure among European officials who coached Zelensky on how to interact with Trump. According to Telegraph, UK ministers and officials have been advising Zelensky on how to speak to Trump and flatter the American president. So we got that. Anything else? I'm just looking around. Ladies and germs. Here we go. Oh, here we go. European leaders and Zelensky did not succeed in changing Trump's peace proposal, which the U.S. president has reached with Putin. Former defense politician and chief of staff with the Sweden Democrats, Michael Valtersen, told Sputnik, quote, the ball is now clearly in Ukrainian and to a lesser degree European hands. A strong and clear no from the European side might result in broken relations between the U.S. and Europe and Ukraine. Therefore, we can expect a maybe from the European Ukrainian side. He notes that playing for time may be part of Zelensky's strategy. If the European leaders really cared for Ukraine, they would pressure Zelensky to accept a peace deal that includes swapping of territories. This would minimize Ukrainian territorial losses and human losses. Well, ain't no territory getting swapped. Good old Mr. Balder said, bad news for you. No territory is going to be swapped. That just ain't going to happen. As I see it, I'm looking to see if there's anything else. I think that's about it, gang. Let's look at tasks to see what anything there. Oh, this is great. Here we go. Now listen to this. This is important. Top of the fold for tasks. The United States, and I think this is beautiful because this is about the security guarantees, and it's exactly what I just said. The Europeans are arguing we will impose security guarantees on the Russians. We will say we're putting NATO troops in. We will say Article 5, right? Listen to this. The United States will consult with Russia on what security guarantees for Ukraine it is willing to accept. White House spokesperson Carolyn Levitt said. It's exactly what I said. Now, what did the Europeans say? We will impose security guarantees on them that whatever we want, they don't get a say. And what did the White House come out and said? We're going to talk to them to see what they're willing to accept. When asked about the possibility of providing security guarantees to Kiev, Levitt said that the U.S. President Donald Trump is discussing the topic with both Russia and Ukraine. He has directed his team to come up with a framework for these security guarantees that can be acceptable to help ensure a lasting peace and end this war, Levitt said. She's the White House spokesperson. They told her to go out and say that. Here's what you need to say. The United States, think about this, will consult with Russia. So they're saying we respect the Russians as our equals and as the people that are winning the war on what security guarantees for Ukraine it is willing to accept. So what are they saying? The Russians are winning the damn war. And if they don't like it, we ain't going to be able to do it. The EU online summit confirms that the strategy to isolate Russia has failed. Well, I'll say this. And that is the meeting in Alaska demonstrated that the attempts to isolate Russia has failed in the West. It never, ever worked. The Africans love the Russians. That ain't going to happen. The Asians, some of them love the Russians. Some of them recognize that they need the Russians. It wasn't going to work there. The South Americans, come on. You ever watch a baseball game in America? You see how many South Americans guys are named Lenin and Vladimir? The Russians have a long history of helping the South Americans fight against U.S. imperialism. I'm just saying it ain't going over in South America. The only place they could continue to argue that the Russians were isolated was in the West, and that whole red carpet scene and ride in the big Cadillac, that ended that. Let's see. Let me see. Trump says when he talked about the security guarantees, he says there will be some form of security. It can't be NATO because that's just not something that would ever happen. The U.S. president, think about that. Security guarantees ain't going to be NATO because that ain't going to happen. He says, listen to this. This is Trump. He's talking to, let me see, where was he? Interview with Fox News. I mean, if you were Russia, would you want your enemy, your opponent sitting on your line? You don't do that. So it was always thought that Ukraine was sort of a buffer between Russia and the rest of Europe. And it was a big, wide buffer. Everything worked out well until Biden got involved. Oh, that's hilarious. That is hilarious. Trump's very simplistic way of saying things are so hilarious. It was a buffer. All was good till friggin' Biden got involved. Oh, that's hilarious. Let me see. Anything else? Let's see. Brussels has rejected any concessions on the Ukrainian settlement, saying it will continue to supply Ukraine with weapons, impose sanctions on Russia, continue to integrate Ukraine into the EU, and demand an immediate ceasefire from Russia, said European Council head Antonio Costa and the chief of European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas. Brussels has reiterated the demands it has been making since the beginning of this year. Contrary to the usual practice, a joint written statement by the 27 EU countries after the summit was not released, so the degree of support for these statements by all EU members is not clear. Time has come to accelerate our efforts and prepare security guarantees for Ukraine similar to NATO's Article 5, with the consistent participation of the United States. Except meanwhile, Trump saying, screw that. He said the Ukrainian army should become the first line of European defense. To be quite frank, it's actually the last line of European defense because they ain't got no armies, for which Brussels should strengthen and unblock all military assistance. The EU must go hand in hand with the United States, which is ready to contribute to security guarantees for Ukraine. It said the European Union, quote, must move forward with the enlargement process, supporting the prospect of Ukraine's admission. He declined to elaborate. Costa also said that Russia allegedly must immediately stop violence in Ukraine. It doesn't matter what it's called. Well, before it was a ceasefire. Doesn't matter what it's called, a truce or an agreement. It is important to maintain pressure on Russia through sanctions if Russia does not agree. Callas wrote on X that the EU does not trust agreements with Russia, and this is why we'll train Ukrainian soldiers to continue to impose sanctions on Russia. According to her, Brussels does not believe that Russia will fulfill its obligations and promises, similar to the Minsk Accords. Security guarantees for Ukraine should deter Russia from regrouping. I know they stopped grouping, that they're regrouping, that they're like somehow ungrouped. Bottom line, this is great because it shows where we are. It shows that we have a gulf, a chasm, dare I say, between the narratives of the US and the narratives of our dear friends and brethren in the EU. All right, so now we shall look for super chats. That's what we shall look for. We shall look for super chats. We're going to look for the super, because I know they're here. I know they're here. Oh, here's one. Let's go. Raphael says, on Russian TV, they're saying Europe is broke. Yep. They will not go to war with them because they do not want to have to take care of them for 100 years. They are more radical than you. You agree, 100%. That's hilarious. I love that. That was a great one, Raphael. Vivian says, don't Trump's ultimatum of 50 then 10 days to Russia show no bilateral discussion was going on? No, it was all a fraud. It was all a fraud. And keep in mind something. Ignore everything that Donald Trump says and only pay attention to what he does. When I learned Donald Trump, when I understood him, is when he said, he said, Zelensky's a dictator. And like a couple days later, they said, so you said Zelensky's a dictator? And he said, did I say that? I don't remember. No, I don't remember. I didn't say that. In other words, he just gaslit. Trump don't care what he said. So his comment of 50 days, 10 days, 50 hours, 10 hours, whatever. And then they said, so are you going to do these 100% tariffs on Trump on China? And he's like, nah, I ain't going to do that. Just like, screw it. I know I said that. I don't care less. So the fact that Trump said 50, 10, 500, 100,000, it's irrelevant. Trump will say anything on any given day, and he will completely do a 180 the next day. So, nah, it doesn't show. I think they were meeting. All right. Anything else? All right. Let's see. Do we have anybody? I don't see. We're looking on Rumble, and I don't see anybody on Rumble who did any Rumble rants. Raphael says, gee, you never see it that way, did you? Let me go back to what Raphael said. Let me get his. He said, they don't have to, they're more radical than you are. You agree. Well, I'm not in Russia, and I didn't suffer 25, 27 million losses. So I would imagine they probably are more radical than me. I can be pretty radical, but I'm pretty laid back. But I don't think, but you know what? Here's the thing I look at it too. If you're for justice, if you're honest as you can be, if you go based on the facts, that's not radical. If you're for peace. So I don't consider myself radical. And you know what? I don't consider the Russians radical because they were attacked. There's lunatics on their border trying to take them out, trying to do them in, trying to steal all their stuff. So they're not radical. They're doing the right thing. They're fairly reserved. If they were radical, they'd have nuked those lunatics in Paris and Berlin and other places long ago. So actually, they're pretty reserved. But thanks a lot, Raphael. Any more super chats? I think that's it. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. I think that's it. Yep. Thanks a lot, Raphael. He's always a great part of the show. And Chicken Patty and all the people were a great part of the show. Kinky and everybody. Certainly appreciate it. Follow me on Rockfin. Follow me on Rumble. Follow me on Telegram, all that kind of stuff. If you can afford to become a Patreon member, if you can afford to donate through PayPal, buy me a coffee is always great. I certainly appreciate it. Cash App. Some people and follow me on Substack. By the way, I now have a P.O. box. So if you choose to mail me something via snail mail, look at that. P.O. Box 32, Glen Burnie, Maryland, 21061. Right there. Feel free. People mail. Some people do mail contributions. Other people mail letters and cards and just write stuff that they think about the show. Other people mail, I've had people send me books and magazines and stuff that they've written. So whatever the case may be. So one guy emailed me some patches and said, will you hold this patch up on it? So if you got something that you want me to maybe hold up during the show, send it to me. A guy emailed me these stickers, right? This is hilarious. So he emailed me these stickers. And the stickers said, it was an Israeli flag, and he said stick it on trash cans. And so I will say I didn't take his advice. I didn't stick it on a trash can. If I'm honest with you guys, I went to a porta potty and I stuck it on the door of a porta potty, an Israeli flag. So thanks a lot, everybody. What was I going to do? I mean, I had no choice. I had to do that. Everybody, have a great day. I'm out.